Which of the following best describes the main idea in the second paragraph? A. It describes how and why William the Conqueror took control of England. B. It explains why castles were first built in England and the military purposes they served. C. It shows how Norman lords were often scared and frequently retreated. Or D. It details all of the purposes that English castles served. In order to answer this question, we need information from the second and third paragraphs, which I have posted here. As we've learned, the main idea of a text or paragraph is an idea that every sentence in the text or paragraph can be traced back to. In other words, the author's main point in writing. Let's go through each choice and see if it can be seen in every sentence in the second paragraph. A. It describes how and why William the Conqueror took control of England. Although it's true that this paragraph describes how William the Conqueror advanced through England and built castles that allowed the Norman lords to retreat to safety when threatened by English rebellion, which one could argue shows how William the Conqueror took control of England, nowhere does it suggest why he took control of England. Because this point is not touched upon in the paragraph, it can be marked as incorrect. B. It explains why castles were first built in England and the military purposes they served. There are two aspects to this choice, one being why the castles were first built, and two being the military purposes they served. We see mention of why castles were built in England throughout the beginning of the paragraph, which tells us, amongst other things, that castles were originally built in England by Norman invaders, and that these castles allowed the Norman lords to retreat to safety when threatened by English rebellion. This explains why these castles were first built. The paragraph goes on to touch upon the second part of our choice, the military purpose they served. The second half of the paragraph tells us that castles also served as bases of operation for offensive attacks. Castles served both offensive and defensive roles in military operations. Because every sentence in our paragraph can be traced back to one of these two ideas, this is very likely our final answer, but we're going to go on just in case. C. It shows how Norman lords were often scared and frequently retreated. Although it's true that the paragraph describes how the castles William the Conqueror built allowed the Norman lords to retreat to safety when threatened by English rebellion, nowhere does it suggest that they were often scared or frequently retreated. And even if it did, because this idea is only touched upon in one sentence, this wouldn't be considered our main idea, and this can be marked as incorrect. D. It details all of the purposes that English castles served. This choice requires careful reading. Although it's true that this paragraph outlines many of the purposes English castles served, the third paragraph goes on to describe even more. For example, that castles also served as offices from which the lord would administer control over his fiefdom. If detailing all of the purposes that English castles served was the author's main point in writing the second paragraph, he would have included all of those ideas in the second paragraph, and wouldn't have split them into two. Therefore, this can be marked as incorrect, and B, it explains why castles were first built in England and the military purposes they served, can be marked as our final answer.